the safety that you and your facilitators and your team created around us was the magic that allowed me to trust the process, which you then showed to us.
Welcome to the Shift Within podcast. I'm your host, Alice. I'm from the Inner Shift Institute, and I'm here to guide you on a journey inside of your mind. Our podcast is a platform for catalyzing both inner and outer shifts using the power of psychedelics and powerful therapeutic tools. Welcome to your new beginning. Welcome to your new life. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Lucy Challenger, a successful entrepreneur from the UK, CEO of Polo and Tweed, and newly qualified psychedelic facilitator in 2024. So, hi, welcome, Lucy. It's really nice to have you here
hi, Alice.
at the Shift Within podcast.
Thank you.
Lucy, you were a participant last year at the Shift Retreat. So it was March 2023 that you came to the Shift Retreat. And then you came again in December 2023. And I wanted to speak with you about your experience, about how your life has changed since the retreat and how your experience was at the retreat itself. So can you maybe start telling us a little bit about yourself, why you came to the retreat, and how your life has changed since?
Sure. Okay, big question. So I joined the retreat. I was 39 years old, married. I have one son who was 7 at the time. And I had everything that I thought I needed in life. I have a successful business. I had a beautiful husband, a beautiful son. We had all the things that one, at least in my social setting, imagined equated success and happiness. And yet, over the years, I had become unhappy. And it wasn't just an unhappiness, it was a high level of growing anxiety, catastrophizing about the future of things going wrong, and a form of depression. I wasn't clinically depressed, but I was beginning to feel deeply unsettled by my emotions, by my daily worries. And so I did what anyone does. I went to the doctor and I said, look, I'm feeling these things. And they do a kind of scale of 1 to 10, ask you and answer questions. And they said, well, would you like antidepressants? And I, up until that point, had been very judgmental of antidepressants. I felt that they were for people who were depressed, and I didn't think I was depressed. I just thought, well, I'm struggling with something, but I can't quite put my finger on it, but I don't need medicine yet. But I listened to the doctor and I thought, well, my anxiety is getting intense. So eventually I decided to go on a low level dosage of antidepressants. And over the course of the time that I was on the antidepressants, I noticed that my anxiety did soften somewhat, but everything else started to soften as well. And I started to lose aspects of joy that I had previously still had in my life, and things became rather numb. And I noticed that growing feeling with, in one hand, relief because I wasn't experiencing the same level of anxiety, but on the other hand, a trepidation that I was in some way muting my emotions, and that wasn't necessarily helping me. Now, I do believe that antidepressants can help people, I believe in modern medicine. My parents are doctors, and I think that when you need help, you should get help, regardless of if your arm is broken through to your mind not feeling happy or right. But I felt that it wasn't working in the way I needed it to. So I started doing research about what else was out there. And I had touched upon psychedelic treatment with regards to PTSD, mainly from the United States, and saw that it was being used to treat people with severe PTSD, depression, anxiety in very positive results. But I, like so much of my social background, thought psychedelics were for people who were either at festivals or hippies or tree huggers or people that just wanted to get high and escape life. And I didn't want to escape life. I wanted to stay founded in life. I just wanted to shift what was going on in my head. So the more I went down the rabbit hole of research, I then started to discover that psychedelics, including magic mushrooms, psilocybin, were being used for therapeutic purposes. And I decided, once I found your retreat, to enroll and book on it. Mainly because I thought, why not? I knew it couldn't kill me. I knew at my age that, my medical history meant that I had an ability to explore this without fear of psychosis or anything serious happening to my brain. I'd never done any psychedelics before. I was terrified, in fact, of doing them because I thought, my God, what happens if I'm that person that wants to jump off the roof thinking that they can fly? But I figured that the team, you and your team, would endeavour to stop me trying to jump off the roof. And so I thought, I've got nothing to lose at this point. I want a shift within my mind. The traditional medicine, which is so easily, handed out in the United Kingdom for depression and anxiety, has not worked. I need to try something else. And so I booked on and got on a plane and turned up.
Yeah, and how was that? Do you want to share how you felt when you arrived and how the week went and what that did to you and what did it do to that anxiety and that feeling of low-level depression that you had?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the entire retreat that you've set up is done in a way that makes or enables people to feel safe. And I think that was one of the biggest concerns I had before getting there, that I would arrive and it would either be a very clinical setting, which tends to make me feel uncomfortable, when you can hear beeping heart rate monitors and things like that, or I would turn up and everyone was kind of praying to goddesses and gods and, dancing around fires. And I would be sat there going, okay, good for you, but, not for me. So I needed something that was in between that. I needed something that was clinically and therapeutically safe and created for healing. But I also wanted something that was, respectful to all religions and cultures and creeds. I'm not religious. I don't believe in God or a higher power, although having experienced psychedelics now, I definitely believe in spirituality in an aspect that I was less open to previously. So I needed that balance. And I think from the get-go, it was very clear that your retreat offered that. There was I had my own room. There was a chef. The food was amazing. I wanted to take her home in my suitcase with me. I think I might have smuggled her home, but so she's not there for your next retreat. Where she's ended up. The people were all professionals with different backgrounds, everyone had their own needs and reasons for being there, but there wasn't this kind of cult assumption that we're all there to just get high. Everyone was there for shift and change, and everyone was taking a step into the unknown at different levels. Some people had experimented previously, and some people had even done therapeutic psychedelics before, but everyone was at their own stages in their journey. And I think I said this to you after the retreat. This was probably the first time in my entire life that I felt as safe and cared for as I did during the experience with you. And that's a bold statement because I had a great childhood. My parents loved me. I did not experience capital T trauma. I wasn't hurt in any way growing up. I was loved very much by my parents. But the safety that you and your facilitators and your team created around us was the magic that allowed me to trust the process, which you then showed to us. And the balance of the spiritual aspect with the grounded in science. chance for us to speak and ask as many questions as we wanted to. It was all done in a very carefully curated way. So I think the entire structure of the week gave me the safety and the stability I needed. I think if it had been a slightly wafty, unknown program where you're just kind of jumping into things, or there wasn't that structure in place, for me that wouldn't have worked. So I felt very safe. There was a clear timetable to the week. The facilitators were always available to speak to them and discuss aspects that were coming up, and it was very clearly organized with questions and answers, and then the days that followed to allow me to access a safe space, and then ultimately choose to take the medicine. I chose to take it. I was still on antidepressants at the time that I came to the retreat. That was a choice again for me. But the last day of the retreat was the last day I ever took an antidepressant. I threw the packet away and never had any withdrawals from it. Without sounding slapdash about it, I didn't look back. I've so fundamentally shifted from that experience that I have changed my relationship with depression and anxiety. And I understand it in a much more profound way that works for me as a human being. It forever changed me. Hence why I have now trained and continue to train to be a facilitator myself, because of the incredible shift it gave to me, and the magic it brought into my life, and what it taught me about myself.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and I'm so happy that you came to our retreat and that you had the experience you had, and what you were sharing. Yeah, it's for us, it's really important to combine the spirituality with the scientific, the Western approach with a little bit of indigenous wisdom, but not to go too much into either side. I don't like extremes. I think I love to look at all of the different approaches, and I find truth in all of them. So why going to one extreme,
sure,
but not to combine it all into one? So that is what we do at our retreats, and probably why you also felt drawn to it. And I'm very happy to hear that you felt so emotionally safe during the retreat, because that is our number one priority. Before I started the Inner Shift Institute, I was a participant myself in psychedelic retreats, and I experienced, while I was always physically safe, that I had some experiences where I was emotionally not safe, and that I came out of the experience that had so much potential to heal me because it's psychedelics, but I felt worse afterwards because I hadn't received that emotional safety. Yeah. And that was my motivation to create these retreats, and give people that emotional safety that I think is so important, to go as deep as we can into our subconscious mind and create the shifts that we need to move forward in life. Yeah. And can you share with us, and you say that your view on anxiety and depression was fundamentally changed during that week, and your relationship to it. Can you share with us how it was and how it is now?
Sure. So obviously I did my first retreat with you in March. I came home. I knew that there were a number of things that I wanted to shift in my actual life, with my marriage and my family life. My husband hadn't experienced what I had experienced, and so I came back very excited to create change, and that was obviously somewhat unsettling for him, because he hadn't experienced what I had experienced, but he was very supportive over my journey. And then, of course, as you know, he then came and did it himself in October, so he was then able to access that shift for himself in whatever way he needed to. And then I came back again in December, and I brought my mum for her to experience the magic. And I think all through that period, including this year as well, along with, my own training to learn to be a facilitator, there has been continually evolutions within how I see my own depression and anxiety. Now, before the very first retreat, I always saw depression and anxiety as being a failure, but B, something that was negative and should be pushed away. And that if I felt those feelings, I was failing because life was great. So why am I feeling them? And also other people's lives were not as good as mine. We can look at our next door neighbor and say, oh, maybe they're not doing as well. And then we can look at war zones and go, oh my God, they're really not doing very well. So why am I suffering when there are people who are being blown up across the world? Who am I to suffer? So there was all those sort of thought processes. And then there was the processes of when I do feel these feelings and they bubbled up, I was like, slam the door, shut them, put them in that box, make them go away, because if I don't think about it and I don't feel it, then maybe they will just disappear. And one of your facilitators gave me an incredibly powerful image and mindset of this on my second retreat with you. And it was about how we look at emotions and our feelings. And I'm a mum, as you know, and I have a little son, and I see him go through all his emotions all the time. And I am always there supporting him and holding his hand through it, even when he is frustrated and angry and sad and grumpy and acting out and I hate you, mummy, and you don't understand me, mummy. And I wish that, he comes out with some really dark emotional outlets sometimes. And I hold his hand both physically and emotionally, and I draw him to me. I never push him away because he's my son and I love him and I will always hold him no matter what is going on in his life. And your facilitator said to me, your emotions are your children and they all sit at the table with you. And it is our job or our duty to keep every child at this table safe. And what would you do if a child is in need? You hold out your hand and you draw your child close to you. Now, that becomes a lot harder when that child is anger or jealousy or distrust or envy or pain or grief or sadness, because you don't really want to feel it. You actually want to kind of go, just go and sit in the corner over there on your own. You'll be fine. But what happens to that child when you don't hold the child's hand? The child protests, as my child protests when he isn't being heard. And he gets louder and he gets louder and he gets louder. And so if you choose to turn away from your sadness or your pain, that pain becomes greater. And in time, your own ability to cope with that pain will become unsettled. And eventually that child will scream so loudly that's all you can hear. And you cannot hear your joy and your laughter and your excitement and all the other things that feel so much better to feel. And so by her describing this to me as a collective of children, I then was able to connect with my inner child, which is the softness that I had lost for myself. And by connecting with my softness, I was able to then hold these emotions closer. And now when I feel depressed or anxious or uncertain or worried or fearful or angry or all of these things, which I still feel because I am still a human being, I have not evolved to enlightenment and become an alien being where I don't feel any of those things anymore. I sit with it and I consider it and I draw it closer, and it still feels really uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong. But I go, you know what? This is good that I'm feeling it. and this is balancing me, because before I was not balanced. And I'm a Libra, I'm scales, and my balance was way out of whack. So yeah, I've just learned and reestablished my relationship with myself, and I was never taught that. I love my parents, they're amazing people, but they never taught me how to do that. But the medicine, along with your amazing team, and then the work that I've done since I returned, because the work never stops, has continued to allow me to evolve and deepen the understandings within myself and my mind.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that it had such a big impact on you, and that this new way of looking at your emotions, like looking at your emotions as your inner children, has given you a tool to release the resistance, because that's all that creates suffering. I really love to look at emotions as our guides in life. If we have emotions that are joyful and that we call positive and light, then a lot of our needs are being met. And if we have emotions like depression and sadness and grief, then our needs are not being met. And if we can look at that, we can actually find out what needs are not being met. And it's very interesting, because like we can have a lot of the basic needs met, that like we have shelter, we have safety, we have maybe financial security, we have love from our family, but still there are needs that are not met, and this is what creates the depression. That's what creates the anxiety. And if we look at it this way, then we can actually ask the right questions to find out what needs are not being met in this moment. And yes, maybe I'm surrounded by love, but I'm not letting it in. So if I don't let it in, then the need for love is not being met, even though it's right in front of me. And then we can ask questions and find out, okay, how can I open myself up to let it in? And we can just ask the right questions, find the right tools. And psilocybin experience, of course, helps a lot to open these gates and to show us the answers to these questions.
Yeah.
So,
and absolutely. And also I think that, we as a society, at least in the Western world, we're taught that our minds and our bodies are the same thing. So, if you have a broken arm, you wouldn't suffer. You would go and get it fixed, if you can, because you would be given pain relief, and you would then treat the arm so that you could heal. Whereas we tend to, and particularly, as I said, I was brought up by two doctors, we tend to have that kind of physical approach when it comes to our minds. We say, oh, I'm feeling sadness and hurt, so let's fix it. Let's get rid of it, or let's mask it with antidepressants, or let's do something to take away from it, rather than like what you're saying, which is hear the sadness and the grief and this unsettled feelings, and what is it that we are missing? What is it that it's telling us we need? But that's really challenging to do, because it goes against everything that we're told in society. And also how mental health is taught from a young age, schools, from our doctors. We aren't given the tools as human beings to manage it. And we also have this sort of quite extreme now pushback, where people use mental health and band it around all the time, and it becomes reactive. People don't want to hear that their employer or their employee has a mental health problem, and that there's things, and it becomes stigmatized because of it, rather than this deepening of understandings of where it comes from within ourselves. And don't get me wrong, when you have someone who is clinically depressed, if they aren't given help, and that can be modern medical interventions of modern medicine and antidepressants, the end results can be catastrophic. Life can end. So some things do need to be fixed in some regards, but it's about how you approach it and how you support it and how you look to heal and shift those patterns. Because, and this will be the last point I make on this one, depression will always be part of my life. And that was one thing that I fell into a slight sort of misalignment when I got back from my first retreat, and why I continue to need to do the work, is that I thought I had fixed my depression and anxiety. I thought, oh, it's done now. I know how to tick that box. I know how to solve it. I know how to have it back again. But actually, that's a dangerous pitfall to fall within, because then when you start to feel it again, it's almost like, oh, now I've really failed because it's back again. I thought I'd solved it. And now I go, no, it's here to stay. But it's just a balanced approach, rather than something that consumes and controls my life.
Absolutely, yeah. And if we can release the resistance to it being there and coming back, I have had the experience with myself, and also with a lot of people who come to our retreats or that I coach, is that the more we can release the resistance to it, the shorter the periods are going to come.
Yeah.
So even now, like 10 years after I was really depressed, and I've done a lot of psychedelic therapy and inner child work, I still have days where I feel depressed, but because I have no more resistance to it, I have like not in 2-3 years felt it longer for than 3 days. But it was a process to get there, because of course you still have like some inner resistance that comes up, and then like in that moment you do the work to release the resistance, and the more you can release it, the shorter the period is gonna get. And maybe in 5 or 10 years from now, it's just gonna be a few hours instead of a day or 3. So yeah, it still comes back. But yeah, if we fight it, if we have this inner fight, then it's going to stay a lot longer, like that child that's going to scream louder if it's not being seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Looking back at your journey, what advice would you give to your past self before attending the Shift Retreat for the first time?
Well, on a practical level, I wish I did it at 25 when my brain was fully developed. Like, birthday of 25 came and off I went to go and experience this. But jokes aside, I didn't feel the calling in my 20s. You know, I was active. I was in my body, in my mind. Everything was as it should be, and everything was balanced. I still felt anxiety and depression, but it was not at the forefront of my experiences, and therefore I didn't feel the need to shift anything, and I was just living my life. I think that the more you can go into an experience like I did, with no preconceived expectations and goals, then that would have been perhaps in the lead up to it, less anxiety inducing, because I spent a lot of time worrying about what was going to happen. But that being said, that's just something that I, as a human being, have to work on and continue to work on now, with that sort of, I'm a planner. I like to know how everything works, and actually if there's question marks over how things work, that gives me anxiety. I like to know everything in a really clear outlook. I have been told that I use my third eye quite heavily, and I can see many different paths ahead of me. And I can overthink, and I can just see it all. That's why I'm very good at planning events and management, because I can just see all the different paths ahead of me. So the more information I could have had to go on to the retreat, the more settled I would have been. But that's just the kind of human being I am. Some human beings don't want any information, because that stresses them out, right? So you can't win in that instance. But I think going into the retreat knowing that I was there to make a shift, but not really knowing the outcome, that was something that I could have held on to a little bit more. I just knew I wanted to change, and I wanted shift to happen. And I hoped that it would give me at least some clarity and answers. And then the reality was, it gave me so much more than I could ever have hoped for. But I did see other participants go with perhaps some preconceived formal ideas of what they wanted. I want the mushroom to answer this question. And then there was disappointment when they didn't get the exact answer they wanted in the way they wanted it. But of course, it's a mushroom. It isn't going to tell you the exact answer for everything. It's going to give you an insight into your own subconscious and own mind and help lead you towards your answers. So yeah, you can't just sort of tick the box, so to speak. And also, interestingly, what I learned as well is and this is something that I'm working on with my own facilitation when I help with people setting their intentions as to the question that they want to ask the mushroom, is that the mushroom is an organic product. It doesn't really understand things like money and work and why we do these things. So if you ask a really heavily monetized or socially constructed question, it's not necessarily going to understand you very well because it's a mushroom. It doesn't have to go to work every day. It doesn't need to pay the bills. It just grows and exists and talks to the mycelium. So sometimes I think the more logical scientific brains, of which I was quite firmly that, but not to the same extent. I'm not a scientist myself. Probably maybe struggle with setting the intention because they want a more like black and white answer, and I'm pretty black and white. But being then able to help guide people and say, well, actually think about it from an animal's perspective or a plant's perspective. What might it be able to help you answer, and then shifting the intention. That also helped me understand more. But that's through training that I've continued to do since leaving the retreat.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your training and where you want to go with that.
Yeah, so I completed a training with Embark, which is an American organization. They're very much at the forefront of leading the shift for psychedelic research and change. Not just psilocybin, also the use of MDMA and ketamine and potentially LSD as well. All of these drugs that have been seen as criminal drugs or illegal drugs, and that people abuse rather than use to have medical shifts. And then I'm looking at a postgraduate, first university postgraduate in the United Kingdom, which I'm hoping to enroll in for the application's open very soon, and I'm hopefully enrolling later 2024 September, and that will be a year post-grad, which I'm absolutely sort of chomping at the bit to get into, because I love the theory as much as the practical application. And having been very honoured and blessed with being able to start to facilitate now for people, the magic in which you can give to someone, the gift you can give to someone to hold space, but do it in a way that really supports their journey. Like you mentioned earlier, not just physically keeping them safe, but emotionally giving them as much support and guidance as you can when it's right to do so, because there's obviously times when you should be stepping back and letting them journey. It's just incredible. I want everyone I know to experience this, and my 8-year-old has already told me that when he's 25, he's going on a journey. He got very disappointed the other day when I told him he couldn't do it at 18. I said, no, you have to wait till you're 25. He's like, Mummy. I was like, that's the day. I will hold space and journey, or I'll just journey with you, and you can come and hold space for us, Alice.
Yes, I would definitely love to. I hope he's not going to do it by himself. A bit earlier.
No.
If you look back at before psychedelics and after psychedelics, in summary, what would you say has shifted in your life?
Wow, okay. I think before psychedelics, I knew that I wanted to shift something within me, but I couldn't work out how. And I couldn't work out why. And I knew that I could do it. I just didn't have the tools to do it. And then after psychedelics, I saw myself. I had and felt true love for myself, of which I had never really understood. Like I aligned to my son. I look at him and I love him with every inch of my body and soul. But I wasn't able to do that for myself. And I didn't know why. And I didn't know why it was important. But then after being able to truly love yourself, you can then truly begin to shift and let go and change. And also your ego, or my ego, through true love of yourself, can start to soften. Because our egos are really, at the best of times, tend to interfere with ourselves. And, you know, we get in the way of ourselves. And it's because it's painful to admit when you get things wrong, or when you keep doing things wrong and you're like, why can't I change this? Why can't I shift it? But the psychedelics showed me my true self. And then I recognized her and went, okay, this is good. We can work with this. And there's definitely things that need to be worked on, Lucy. It's a work in progress. And then I have the confidence to continue to do it. And I think that was what was interesting coming back into my second retreat with you. I remember sitting at the table and saying to you, I'm in such a better place now. When I first came to do psychedelics, I was not in a good place. You know, I say that in inverted commas. I felt lost. I felt like something needed to shift. Whereas now I sit 9 months later at this table going, I'm pretty good now. Like, what happens if the mushroom shows me that I'm doing the wrong thing? Mm. Or what happens if it says, no, like, you've got this all wrong. Like, stop, time out, like, let's start again. And what happens if it shows me that I'm doing the wrong thing? And I was so scared of that because everything was okay. And I remember you looking at me and saying, do you feel that you're doing the wrong thing? And I said, no, I know I'm doing the right thing. And you said, well, the mushroom isn't going to have an argument with you and start like telling you, like showing you all these different things. It's going to show you new ways to consider your current situation. And that's exactly what it did. It showed me my truth. It showed me new ways of looking at it. And it was incredibly beautiful and incredibly deepening of the work that I had done up till that point. But I was more scared going into journey 3 and 4 than I was in journey 1 and 2, because I felt I had more to lose. Mm-hmm. And that is a really interesting kind of juxtaposition between, you know, going into it from a place of really needing to change versus I'm kind of good now. What's it going to show me? And interestingly, I was speaking to someone the other day who is quite experienced with mushroom journeys. And he said that he occasionally goes into a journey to thank the mushroom, to thank the medicine for showing him what it has shown him. Mm-hmm. Like going in with a completely sort of open-hearted, I'm just coming to thank you for doing what you've shown me, and creating such beautiful shift and change and put an enlightenment in my own brain. And I thought that was a really lovely approach. So I think, well, I've got some ideas for my next journeys anyway, but I think at some point in my life, I'll definitely be journeying and just going, thank you so much.
Yes, it's an incredible substance, or even being, you know, like once you've experienced it, you know, it's a being. Yeah. It is a spirit. It is, you know, like it is not just a hallucination. There is really an intelligence there guiding us, no matter how we call it. And yes, that's a really beautiful thing to go on a journey, just to thank that intelligence, that being, for helping us on our way, for releasing us from like heavy burdens and struggles, and teaching us how to just be, and be in a much more light way. And just, and also what I really love is when the mushrooms show us how ridiculous our thoughts are, and start laughing about us in our head, and then we have to go, like, we go into laughter about how ridiculous our thoughts are, and but can really see it, and see it from that perspective, and join in.
But I would say,
love how that happens.
I would say, you know, based on what you're saying, if anyone's watching this or listening to this that hasn't experienced it and is a skeptic, they will be, and I know because I was that person, they will be saying, what are you talking about? The mushroom as a being? Like, this is where the hippy dippy stuff comes in. And like, I turned off before. I was like, the mushroom is not a being. The mushroom is a plant or a vegetable, whatever it is. And there is no otherworldliness. And this is ridiculous. And these women are crazy. And they have just like lost their plot because of the psychedelics they've done. And I totally get that skepticism, because I was that person. And that's why I want everyone in the planet to try it, because then they will be like, oh, okay. So if you're watching this and you think we're crazy, go on Alice's retreat, and then call me and tell me if you think that we're crazy.
Absolutely, yes. And I was a skeptic just like you were before I did it the first time. I really love logic, and I love to understand things in scientific ways. And so it's like my best friend back in the day, he came to me, and he came back from a psychedelic experience and told me time doesn't exist. And I'm like, have you gone completely crazy? What do you mean time doesn't exist? And I was like, so judgmental. And I said, can you please stop doing this? This is not good for you. You just seem like you're going crazy. But he somehow just felt like he felt better and better in himself. And I was like, what is this? Maybe if I'm this judgmental, I should try it out at least once to see what they're talking about. And then I did, and I'm like, okay, now I know what they're talking about.
And I completely agree with him. Time is an illusion. It doesn't exist. And I know that because on my 4th journey, I stopped time.
Yes.
And that was really cool.
Yes. And the mind cannot comprehend it. So if anybody watching is thinking we're completely crazy, yes, the mind is always going to think that is crazy. But when you enter that space of the psychedelics, you go into a different space. You're not in the conscious mind anymore. You're in the subconscious. You're in a different realm. You're in a feeling state. And in that state, there is a knowing that time doesn't exist. And it's hard to actually put in words and to explain it, because it is not to be explained by the mind. That is a very rational thing. And in our rational selves, time, of course, exists.
Yeah. So. And also for anyone watching that is scientific and, you know, doesn't believe what we're saying, all that aside, you don't need to believe that the mushroom is a being. You don't need to believe any of this stuff, right? But placebo exists. We know that people can cure themselves from cancer and from deadly diseases through believing it with their brain, because that placebo is a thing. And that is proven in the medical community around the world. So if you can take a mushroom and it can heal you in some way, why not?
Yes.
Like, forget all the other spiritual stuff from it. Forget all the kind of stuff that we're talking about, bending time and, you know, the magic mushroom man or woman or whatever being they are coming and sprinkling magic into our eyes. Like, if it can heal you in any regard, why should you not use it and explore it and give that gift to yourself?
Yes.
That's the way I look at it.
And it might just shift your complete view of life and your complete life and make it better. So come and try it out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love to just be, like open mind. And I think anybody listening to this must already have an open mind. Otherwise, they would not be listening to a podcast where we speak about psychedelics.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, just explore it. Both you, Lucy, and I were very skeptical before we tried it. But if we're so judgmental, if we're skeptical, try it, and then we can have our own point of view, right?
And I think, I understand that judgment typically comes from a place of fear. I judge, I still judge because I'm a human being. And I work on that daily to hear that judgment that comes into my mind and consider, where is that coming from? Why am I thinking this way? And I have always made conscious decisions to step into the unknown and have curiosity for life. And that doesn't start with psychedelics. That has started since I was a very little girl and wanted to explore life. And, I understand that a lot of people will go through life never feeling the calling or need to explore things, in which case they don't need to. But to experience magic before you die, and we're only on this planet for just a drop of time, what have you got to lose?
Absolutely. Well, and that is such a beautiful ending that I would love to stop right here. And thank you for this really beautiful conversation, and thank you for finding us and for coming to our retreat last year and coming back and staying in touch and letting us know about yourself and sharing so openly. I'm sure this conversation has helped a lot of people to understand the experience better and what can happen. And and I'm so happy that it helped you so much that you are now on a similar path of helping other people by facilitating psilocybin or psychedelic journeys. That is really beautiful, and I believe the world needs more psychedelic facilitators. So I'm very happy about that. So,
thank you, Alice. Thank you for all the work you do. It is, we live in a consumerist world, and I appreciate money opens doors and gets us things, but the work that you've done with your team and what you've created and the lives that you touch and you changed my life, and it makes it sound very grandiose and dramatic, but you did. So thank you for your work, and I hope that today's chats, for anyone who's watched or listened, has been really helpful and gives them some food for thought and consideration as to how and when they will access the magic themselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it touches me a lot. And that is why I do what I do. So receiving that feedback gives me a lot of motivation to continue.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. And for all listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and that if you want to stay connected to us, you can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and YouTube. You can find us under the Inner Shift Institute. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more conversations and insights. And if you have any feedback, or if you would love us to speak about specific topics, please let us know so we can cover this in future episodes. So thank you very much, and thank you, Lucy. Thank you for listening to the Shift Within podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe for more insightful conversations. Keep asking, keep understanding, keep shifting within, and see you next time in the next episode.